Hi everyone, my name is Greg and I'll be walking you through how to import a list of scheduled maintenance into Maintenance Assistant CMMS. Now, like any other import you perform, the hard part is actually building the sheet ahead of time. Once the spreadsheet is built and the data is populated, performing the import in the software is rather straightforward. So I've got here an example spreadsheet I'm going to use to import two different scheduled maintenance. Now, the first column is my data headers. So these are all the different fields I can import to. Most of these are optional. There's only a few mandatory ones. So first off, I have the SM code. This is an optional field. So here I've specified for these two scheduled maintenance, I want the code to be SM32 and the next one SM33. If I hadn't assigned a code for these, the system would just assign one automatically. The SM description is pretty self-explanatory. And then the asset code or asset name serves to identify which asset you'd like to assign to the scheduled maintenance. They both do the same thing. I can either use the asset code, say A50, or I can type out the name of the asset, say CNC machine. I also have the option of using both. So I can write A50 and list the name as a CNC machine. I prefer to use the asset code just because it's a bit more accurate. You're less likely to make spelling mistakes, and you might have multiple CNC machines with the same spelling, but you're likely to only have one asset that has the code of A50. Okay, so it's less prone to error if you use the code. SM status, that's just the work order status when the scheduled maintenance eventually does generate a work order. And the SM task number and SM task description. So you have the opportunity to add multiple tasks to the same scheduled maintenance. For this one here, SM32, I haven't added any tasks. But for SM33, I've added 2. And the way I've done this is the first task is pretty straightforward. I just label it as task number 1 and write the description for it. For the second one, the second line rather, I'm going to include just the SM code, and then these are more or less optional. I don't need to include the description again. I don't need to include the code again or the status. All I need is the identifier for which scheduled maintenance, and then I can say which task number it is. So in this case, it's the second task, and what I want the task to read. Again, the rest of these are pretty self-explanatory. I can specify a maintenance type. I can attach it to a project. This has to be an existing project in the system. I just write out what the name of it is. I can also indicate the priority. And the last one, I can also attach, rather than individual tasks to the scheduled maintenance as I've done here, I can attach an entire task group. Okay, so lockout tagout procedure is a task group I have in the system already. And here I've chosen to attach it to SM32. So there are a few things I'll point out about imports in general. The first is that spelling becomes really important. So let's say for the maintenance type, I misspell preventive and I put something like, say, preventive with 2 E's. When it gets to this line, the software isn't going to tell me I've made a mistake on this line and it should be preventive with 1 E. Instead, what it'll do is create a brand new maintenance type that'll be spelled this way, and then it'll attach that to the scheduled maintenance. All right, so spelling is very important. And the next thing I'll say is, before you import a list of 100 scheduled maintenance, just do it with a couple first. Build a shorter test list with maybe 3 or 4, run that, import that list rather, and see how it looks after the import. If you're satisfied that you know how it works and all the fields you want to capture are captured correctly, then go ahead and import the entire list. All right. So we've got our example here, just the 2 scheduled maintenance. I'll save it. And then we'll go ahead and complete the import. So to do that, I'll go to my software, down to settings, and I'll click import. Here it'll ask me what kind of data do I want to import. In this case, it's scheduled maintenance. Okay, it asks me to select the CSV file. Again, this is very important. I can't upload anything that's not a .csv. Okay, so even though I edit the file in Excel, I have to save it as a special file extension .csv. So here I have the file, upload it to the software, and then continue. All right, so in this portion of the import, I'm going to map the columns in my spreadsheet on the left here to data fields that exist in CMMS. So because I built my spreadsheet correctly, I don't really need to map anything over. It's going to know that because I titled my columns correctly, rather, it's going to interpret them as I wanted them to be. So SM description is SM description, asset code is asset code, etc. I didn't have any spelling mistakes here. I didn't try and import a field that doesn't exist. So the system figures it out pretty easily. For the default schedule maintenance status, so every schedule maintenance you import has to have a status. If you leave the status blank for any of the schedule maintenance, it'll assign it whatever you set here. Okay, so if I had not set the status for this one here, when I completed the import for SM32, it would give it the status of requested. Okay, and I'll continue. Two records to import. All right, and that's more or less it. I can go down to my maintenance tab, select schedule maintenance. I have two more here. So the real limitation behind importing schedule maintenance is that you can't set the schedule during the import. That's just too complicated to capture with this feature. There's too many options available. So after you import the schedule maintenance, you'll have to manually go to each thing you import. And let's say I want this done annually. Go to the scheduling tab and set the schedule by hand. Okay, and then activate the schedule maintenance to make sure that it's running.